Sure. There we go. I wasn't sure the video was recording, but good Tuesday morning, ladies. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. The lighting is kind of weird today. The sun is shining really brightly, and I'm very thankful for that. But it kind of changes my lighting in here. I like to, so I'm sorry if you see a glare on my glasses. I was trying to get that off, but I didn't really want to close the blind all the way because I'm enjoying the sun. But glad to have you following along today. And if this is your first time here, if you like the video and you want to stay following us, hit the thumbs up. And then be sure to leave a message in the comments section with your email, and that way I can send you the notes and the links for the Bible study. So today we're continuing on in our study of the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 12. And this is a pretty lengthy lesson. Lesson 4 is. And so because of that, I'm going to try to keep my comments small. It definitely will be 2 weeks of Bible study in this lesson, though. And so we're going to get right into it this morning. And we're going to jump right to the verse that we're studying, and that is Matthew chapter 5, verse 5. And that is, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And so we're talking about meekness today. And the Bible picture of meekness shows that it's not a natural trait, but it's a spiritual fruit. And so it's something that should be evident in the life of a believer if you have a walk with the Lord. And if we look at Galatians chapter 5 and remind ourselves again what the fruit of the Spirit is, Galatians chapter 5 verses 22 and 23 says this: "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law." So it's a fruit of the Spirit. But it's interesting that it's also in the Beatitudes, and that tells me that God wants that, expects that to be in our lives as believers, this attitude of meekness, or this character trait of meekness, I should say. And so number one, the very first question is, underline the following words that define meek. And so it gives you a list. So it gives you weak, gentle, timid, submissive, lazy, or humble. And of course, I'm sure you all underlined the correct three, which are gentle, submissive, and humble. Those all define the word meek. And then going a little deeper, I hope when you do the Bible study that you take time to really read the passages and maybe back up and study that passage a little bit more to get a better understanding of what you're reading. But even in a question like this, where it's not necessarily a verse that you're studying, but a definition, once you find the correct answer, get the definition. And one of the best places to get that is the Webster's 1828 dictionary, and it's online, totally free. So I have that in my phone and use it regularly. But for gentle, the definition that Noah Webster gives in the 1828 is mild, soft, not rough, not harsh, not severe, tame, peaceable, not wild, soothing, not violent. So that's the definition of gentle, which is a definition of meek. Submissive is the next correct answer, and that is yielding to the will or power of another. Obedient, humble, acknowledging one's inferiority. And then the third correct answer was humble, and that means lowly, not magnificent, high, or lofty, having a low opinion of oneself and a deep sense of unworthiness in the sight of God. And that doesn't mean you walk around saying, I'm not worthy, look at me, I'm just humble, lowly. So it's not something you work up, it's an attitude of the heart, And so the first question in our lesson is, who are the meek? And a couple different writers put it this way. One is Matthew Henry, and I read him occasionally, his thoughts on different passages. And he says, "The meek are those who quietly submit themselves to God, to his word, or to his rod, who follow his directions and comply with his designs, and are gentle toward all men." And you'll find that in Titus chapter 3, verse 2. They are the meek, who are rarely and hardly provoked, but quickly and easily pacified, and who would rather forgive 20 injuries than revenge one, having the rule of their own spirit. And I would like to think that that's what I strive for. I know I fail many times, and it might not be outward with me because I am more of an inward person. And I know it's not good to hold unforgiveness and grievances and bitterness and all that kind of thing in your heart, but I am not a fighter. I'm not an arguer. I run from confrontation. I just won't do it. I won't argue. But I know I need help in this area. We all do. And then another man, he said, this man, Zig Ziglar, he was a motivational speaker back in the 60s and 70s. And he said the word meek has had a very bad reputation because most people think of the word meek and they think it's someone who's cowering in timidity. But that's not really what the word means. It actually means strength under control. And we've talked about this in previous lessons. It means strength under control, like the strength and beauty of a champion racehorse under the direction of an expert jockey. Like the horse responding to the jockey, every move, every nudge, the horse does what the jockey commands. And we move in concert with God's instruction. And so it's kind of that kind of thing. And so after reading their descriptions of meek, in one sentence, how would you describe meek? How would you define a meek person? And what I put, and I would like very much to see your answers just to know that you're with me, excuse me, and that you're following along and that you're doing this study. It helps me if I can see, some interaction from you. So maybe in the comment section under the heading for the video, put what you think a meek person is. I put that it's a person who's easily submitted to the will of his or her master Jesus, and to others who touch his life. And so if you're a meek person, you'll submit first of all to the Lord Jesus. If you're married, it would your spouse, and that goes both ways. The wife submits to the husband submits to the wife. That's biblical, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. In the church, it would be your pastor, easily submitting to the authority of your pastor. And so that's what a meek person does. They easily submit. The opposite of that, a person that's not meek would want control and want to be in charge. Just they have all the answers. They don't need counsel from anybody. They don't need your help with anything. It becomes a real pride issue. And there are some portraits of meekness that we can look at, and the Bible provides several of them. First one is Jesus, of course. He was our greatest example of meekness. He described himself as meek and lowly, and that's in Matthew chapter 11, verse 29, when he said, "Learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart." And what he was telling us was, I can teach you this. I can teach you how to be meek and lowly in heart if you just follow me, if you just read my word and do the things that I say. He'll teach you these things. He's most qualified to teach us those kind of things. But the choice is ours, if we're going to be wise enough to learn of him. Or will we continue to be headstrong and let our foolish, prideful hearts and our tongues get us in trouble? Because that's what happens when we don't learn of Jesus. And then the next one is Abraham. Abraham demonstrated meekness, which again is strength under control in this area of material wealth and personal right. And so number 3 says, read Genesis 13, 1 through 13. And I hope you'll forgive me because for the sake of time, I'm going to try to lock us straight up into 30 minutes. And so it's going to prevent me from reading every single lengthy passage. I trust that as you're doing the Bible study, you are reading the passage to get your answer. Last week I went right about 35 minutes, and it bumped me into 2 videos, and I don't want to do that again. So it says, read Genesis 13, 1 through 13. And then the question is, there was strife between Abraham's and Lot's herdsmen. What was the strife about? And if you took the time to read the passage, it was land. They were striving over the land. They both had great wealth lots of cattle and sheep and all that, and they couldn't dwell together anymore. And so they were needing to find a place to have their belongings, their wealth, their herds and everything. And so number 4 says the land had been promised to Abraham. Lot was just kind of tagging along. How did Abraham picture meekness according to Genesis 13:9? And I will read that one. I won't read the lengthy ones, but I will read that one. Genesis 13:9. Let's look at that really quick. It'd be kind of weird to have a Bible study and not read verses. Verse 9 says, Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And so, according to that verse, how did Abraham picture meekness? And honestly, since the covenant was made to Abraham, he could have pulled rank. He was older. That land was promised to him. Lot was the nephew. So he could have chosen the best land, the well-watered land, but he didn't. He let Lot choose first rather than have strife. And he submitted to Lot's choice. And we see what the end of Lot was. But rather than argue with Lot, Abraham let him take that. And that was a great illustration of meekness, because he really could have used his position and power, but he knew that God was in control and that God would work things out. And that is the same attitude that we need to have. So these are good examples for us of meekness. It's hard not to want our own way in things, isn't it? And we sometimes in our heart and mind have things all figured out, how I'm going to do this and this and this. And those of you that are married, you may decide something like that, and then your spouse says, no, we're going to do this and this and this. Well, meekness is submitting your will to that of another. And it's hard sometimes to reconcile that stuff in our heart and mind when we already have our mind made up. I'm going to buy this house, or I want to buy that car, or I'm going to paint the living room this color, I'm going to buy that couch. It's submission. Meekness. And then the next one is David. David demonstrates meekness in the area of unfair treatment. And I'm pretty sure probably most all of us have had a time in our life when we were treated unfairly. In 1 Samuel chapters 24 through 26, they give us the details of King Saul's pursuit of David in order to kill him. None of us, I don't think, have been chased down in an attempt for somebody to kill us. But God had anointed David to be the next king, and Saul hated him for that. And so if we read 1 Samuel 26, verses 7 through 12, summarize the scene that you just read. And it's David and Abishai had come upon King Saul sleeping in a cave, and stuck in the ground next to him was his spear. And so Abishai said, God hath delivered thine enemy into thy hand this day. And David said he would not destroy Saul because Saul was God's anointed. He believed that the Lord would have to strike Saul, or that Saul would die in battle. Excuse me. He wasn't going to raise his hand against God's anointed. And so then number 6 says, how did David demonstrate meekness? Again, that's strength under control. And it was, even though David had been anointed king, he believed that Saul was still the anointed one until God chose to take him out of his life. And so he chose to trust God rather than doing what he felt like doing. He could have easily probably picked up that spear and killed Saul and gone on with his life. But he knew the order of things and how things should be and who should be in control, and that's God. And so earlier, David had said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master. The Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. And that's 1 Samuel 24, verse 6. He wanted his men to know that Saul was absolutely wrong. But David believed that no matter how unfairly he was treated, it wasn't his job to make it right. That was God's business. And boy, what a lesson we can learn there, huh? It's hard to not want to take things that we feel are out of our grasp, out of our control, and try to fix them. If you just give it to the Lord and wait patiently for him to work it out. He always does. But we like to get in there and say, Lord, I know you need my help with this, so let me tell you how this should go down. And my goodness, we mess up our lives so horribly by doing those kind of things. Just back away, give it to the Lord, and wait patiently and let him work it out. He always does. The next example is Moses, and Moses illustrates meekness in the area of criticism. Have you ever been criticized by anybody? It's not fun, is it? Especially when you're trying to do right. Serving the Lord, being faithful, giving of yourself, and here comes criticism from somebody, how or why you did something, And I really feel like that's one of the devil's favorite tools to use on a believer is criticism, because it can be very discouraging and make you want to quit. Excuse me. So if you read the passage in Numbers, chapter 12, verses 1 through 4, the question is, why did God recognize Moses as the meekest man on earth? Let's flip over there real quick. Numbers chapter 12. Numbers chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. And that says, and Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? Can you just hear them? Yikes. And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek, above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, come out, ye three, unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. Doesn't it put you in mind of three children that are naughty and the father calls them out? You kids, get out here. It's just, and they may be like in their room supposedly cleaning, and then they start arguing and fighting over things, and the father hears it and strikes fear in their heart. Oh my goodness. But according to those verses, why did God recognize Moses as the meekest man on earth? Moses, he didn't say anything when his brother and sister were criticizing him. He didn't say, I'm in charge, I'm the leader, I'm the head. He didn't say that. He just didn't comment on it. And that's a character trait of a meek person. Verse 2 says, and the Lord heard it. That should strike fear in any of our hearts. To be careful what comes out of this thing comes across our tongue and out through our lips. That should strike fear in our hearts, to know just that phrase, and the Lord heard it. How many times have we said things maybe about somebody or something that's happening maybe in the church or in someone's life, and it'd be classified as gossip, and the Lord heard it. But it almost seems like Moses didn't even notice what they had said. And how does that picture meekness? Moses did not lash out. He could have. He did not lash out. He didn't defend himself. He left it to God to deal with Aaron and Miriam. And you know what? If something is troubling you, you have problems somewhere in your life with somebody, give it to the Lord. And he knows how to deal with people better than you do, because our flesh gets in the way and we say things, whether we mean them or not. Many times they come out in not a graceful way. Many times it descends into anger. And so God asked Aaron and Miriam how they weren't afraid to speak against my servant Moses. How is this? And that's in verse 8. He was angry at them for what they had done. He was angry at the two of them and vindicated Moses by causing Miriam to get leprosy. What a horrible, scary thing, but what a lesson to her to learn to speak right and not speak against the leader. And I think so often, I hope you don't do this. Maybe the pastor says something you don't like, maybe you think he's preaching just against, your life or whatever, and you get upset with him, and maybe you go home and say things to your husband or your family about the pastor. Don't do that. And the Lord heard it. I think the point is in this passage here that meekness means committing your cause to God. Do it. Commit it to God. You don't need to defend yourself, honestly. If you're doing what you do for the Lord, He knows your heart. Meekness is the power to absorb adversity and criticism without lashing out. How are you doing in that department? That's a tough one, isn't it? If somebody comes at you and they start saying things, or you maybe imagine that behind your back they're saying things, it's hard not to let our heart and our mind well up with weird imaginations and thoughts, or even just to lash out. Another really great example for us is Joseph, and each one of these could be a Bible study in themselves. I'm having a really hard time skimming through these. The next one is Joseph. He is a role model of meekness in the area of mistreatment. My goodness, don't you see yourself in so many of these pictures here? The area of mistreatment, Genesis chapters 37 through 50, they give us a picture of a favorite son, and that was Joseph. He was hated by his brothers. They had sold him into slavery. And then he was taken into Egypt, where years later, because of a famine in Canaan, Joseph's brothers went to buy grain. They didn't know that Joseph had become prime minister of Egypt, and God has a plan for our lives. It might seem like, what in the world is happening? But just trust Him. Just hang on, and He'll show you in the end the reason for it. They didn't know he had become prime minister of Egypt, and he had the authority to sell them grain. They did not know him, but he knew them. What an opportunity for him to exact revenge on them for what they had done to him, but he didn't. In Genesis 45, verses 4 and 5, and then in Genesis 50, verses 19 and 20, the question is, how does Joseph's treatment of his brothers picture meekness, which again is strength under control? Let's read Genesis chapter 50, verses 19 and 20. I love this story of Joseph and the forgiveness that you see. And man, I want to be that kind of forgiving person, no matter what people say and do to me. Genesis chapter 50, verses 19 and 20 says, "And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive." That's forgiveness. Wow, it's okay. I know you threw me in a pit. I know you sold me into slavery. I know you told my father that I was dead and made up lies about me. He didn't say any of that. But, in their heart, they probably felt bad for all the things they had done to him, now seeing, and he said, it's okay. God meant it for good. Could we say that if somebody had done those things to us? I hope so. But the question is, how does Joseph's treatment of his brothers picture meekness? Well, he didn't hang on to his hurts from the past. And it's so harmful when you do that. The devil constantly wants you to turn around and look in your past at things that have hurt you. Don't do it. Don't fall into that trap. Because when you do, the minute you turn your head around and look at things in the past, you've opened the door to him. And when you open the door, he immediately sticks his foot in. And he doesn't stop with just the foot. Next thing you know, he wiggles his knee in. And the next thing you know, he's sitting in the living room with you. Don't open the door to him when he tempts you with things from your past, hurts. He didn't hang on to hurts from his past and dwell on how he could get revenge. When he had the chance to deal out revenge, he didn't. He realized that God, not his brothers, was in control of his life. Wow, that would be hard, standing on that auction block, being sold as a slave. That would be tough to, in your heart and mind, know God has a reason for this. God has a reason for this. God has a reason for this. Just keep telling yourself that, and it'll keep you from being unforgiving, and it'll keep you from getting bitter. Did Joseph retaliate? No, because that would be taking matters into his own hands and taking the place of God. Vengeance is God's business. It is. If he feels like somebody needs to be punished for what they did to you or said about you, then he'll take care of that. Just leave it alone. Let it go. And I know when I say that some of you have had some very hard and hurtful things done to you and said to you, but let it go. Let it lay. Leave it in the past. It's God's work to mete out justice or mercy to those who have done us wrong. You're not God and neither am I. And he doesn't need our help in sorting it out and working it out. Number 10 says, have these Bible characters given you a clear view of meekness? If so, in what way? And this is an opportunity for you to interact and put your answers to this question, to number 10, in the comment section. Or if you're in our church, if you want to do it on the ladies WhatsApp group, that's fine too. But I really would like to see some interact. And I know I say this every week, but it's Bible study. I really would like to see some interaction from some of you, some of your answers. How have these Bible characters given you a clear picture of meekness? We've got some good examples to follow after, things that will help us. And then the next section is the practice of meekness. And we're kind of going in a different direction now, and we've got about 5 minutes left. I hope you don't feel like I'm rushing too much, but this is a very lengthy lesson, and I want to try to get as much to you as I can in a short time. And so, switching gears now to the practice of meekness, in James chapter 1, let's flip over there. James chapter 1, verses 19 through 21 says, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Wherefore lay apart all filthiness and superfluitive naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls." And so James had two people in mind in this verse here. Excuse me just a second. James had two people in mind in this passage here. How would you describe them? Two different people in these 3 verses here. And so according to those verses that we just read, one obviously is evil and angry, correct? One is evil and angry. The other person is slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to anger. Two totally different people. Which one do you see yourself in there? Are you one who, as soon as somebody says something to you that you don't like, you immediately have a reaction, not a response, a reaction, and it's not a kind or gracious one, it's an angry one? Is that how you react? Or do you just listen, think about what you're going to say, don't get angry, or if you do, it's a slow thing? Which of the two people in these verses picture a meek person? And I think you know the answer to that. It's the one who listens and is slow to condemn. Where do you see yourself falling in this study? Which person are you? And if you're the one that's quick, with anger or hurtful words or, wrong attitudes, ask the Lord to help you correct it. Honestly, he can help you with this. The one who listens and is slow to condemn, that's the one who pictures meekness. This person has a gentle, submissive spirit, and they're ready to listen and to learn what God and others have to say to him. It's not a matter of, I only listen to God, he's the only authority. No, there's others. There's other people that can help you and teach you things. There's your spouse, there's your pastor, if you're younger, maybe your teacher, Sunday school teacher, your youth pastor. There's so many authorities in our life, and the Bible says, let every man be your teacher. So there's something to learn from everybody. You don't have to be the one that always has the last say, honestly. Ask the Lord to help you be kind and gracious and slow to this kind of same thing. There's an old saying, and you probably have heard it, but God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we'll listen twice as much as what we say. And that's a good rule to live by, honestly. So many verses in Proverbs about this kind of thing. And then James chapter 3 says, verses 3, and I'm not going to turn here for sake of time because we're just about done. James chapter 3 verses 13 through 17 says, "How does a meek person show out of a good conversation or our way of living his works with meekness and wisdom?" How does a meek person show that. And if I were to paraphrase verse 17, this is how I would describe it. Just like this. He's peaceable, gentle, easily entreated or open to reason. It's not your way or the highway. He's submissive, merciful. He shows no favoritism, and he's always sincere. That's kind of how I would paraphrase that verse. But I hope you see yourself in verse 17, that you're peaceable, that you're gentle, easy to be entreated. Do people walk on eggshells when you're around, or do they know they can come to you with anything and you'll treat them without favoritism and you'll be sincere and gentle with them? So look at verse 17. It says, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated. Those are the marks of meekness in that verse there. And it's remarkable to me that the marks of biblical wisdom and meekness are the same. Yes? Do you see that there? Wisdom and meekness are similar in that they're both peaceable and gentle. So be a wise, meek person. Ask Lord to help you with it. If you're the opposite of what we've studied this morning, ask Lord to help you correct attitudes in your life, and he will. Listen, he wants you to do right. He does. And when you come to him and say, Lord, I need help with this, help is on the way. Trust me. Well, that's all the time we have for this morning. Thanks for joining us. And if you would like to follow along, if you're new and you're not receiving the notes, please send me an email. And I'll link my email down below the Bible study here so that you can stay in touch. And I'll be sure to send you the notes and the links for the Bible study. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful day. And look for somebody today to be a blessing to. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.